in the capable hands of my colleagues.
Excellent. So we're going to hear from Senator Sheldon. Thank you.
Good, thanks very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Now, I understand there are plans to relocate up to 65 air traffic controllers from Sydney Terminal Control Unit to the facility at Melbourne Airport within the next 24 months. Has a final decision been made about this proposal? Mr. Hartfield?
Jason Hartfield, Chief Executive Officer. No, a final decision has not been made, Senator.
When is the decision likely to be made?
The decision, I'll call it the full decision, probably in the next couple of months. We're in consultation at this moment in time, particularly with staff, and we're taking that consultation, and that consultation will have to be considered before making a final decision.
Do you have any indication of how many of those 65 air traffic controllers are willing to uproot their lives and families to relocate to Melbourne?
At this moment in time, Senator, is that what we have offered is that if anyone wants to stay in Sydney, that they can stay in Sydney. And we would factor in training extra people down in Melbourne if we made the decision. So we're not totally reliant on people moving. And at this stage, the indications, if my memory serves me correctly, would be around about between 5 and 10 that would be willing to move, and a range that would be happy to go down on a temporary basis down to Melbourne to train others. So
just with the 5 to 10, which still leaves almost, or certainly 40% of the workforce still staying in Sydney.
Yep.
What's the intention of that workforce then? Is the intention, so if on the basis that people are carrying out their normal employment responsibilities as working in that area as air traffic controllers, if those that decide to stay in Sydney, do they have a hard mark where the Sydney jobs won't exist?
No, Senator. In actual fact, one of the reasons we are considering this transfer of the services that are in the airspace that are in the Sydney Basin down to Melbourne is that we will need to increase our staffing footprint in Sydney for the Sydney Basin with the introduction of Western Sydney Airport. And so we're going to have to put in a new air traffic control tower at Western Sydney Airport. There is the air traffic control tower at Sydney Airport that still remains, and there is movement there with staff all the time as well. And furthermore, there are other roles that we have in Sydney that people may choose to do as well. So if someone wants to stay in Sydney as an air traffic controller, they will be employed as an air traffic controller doing air traffic control in Sydney.
So if there's, just so I'm clear, not that you haven't been clear, but just so I'm clear,
yep.
If there's 50 to 60 people that work on the basis as an indicator of 5 to 10, yep. So they would transfer. So 55 to 60 people, that their jobs would be secure at Sydney Airport as air traffic controllers.
Yes. Just to put a clarification, a number of those controllers have put up their hand for redundancy due to their age and where they are in their cycle, which they would be eligible for as well. But if people want to stay as a controller working in Sydney, they will be able to do so.
How many redundancies have been offered across the group? Those
at this stage, because we're in consultation, these are people that put their hand and say they would consider it. My understanding is that, and I'll correct this if I got the number wrong, but in the order of about 20.
Is there a concern about losing all that skill?
Senator, that the controllers that we have, these are controllers that will be getting close to retirement anyway. And so we would be having to factor in refreshing that workforce with trainees anyway over a period of time. But there is... it is always something that we would consider, but it's not a significant risk because the staffing that we have all have to be trained to a certain level of competency and a requirement, and after a couple of years have the commensurate level of experience.
So part of the, in an article on the ABC News website from the 26th of April, it described the proposal as a cost-cutting measure. The Sydney Morning Herald on the same day reported it as a controversial plan partly aimed at cutting costs. So is the relocation a cost-cutting exercise?
No, Senator. There is some cost avoidance that will occur with the change for the replacement of the current facility that the controllers are housed at Sydney Airport. It's a building that I think is 50 plus years old, that is coming to end useful life, so we would have to build a new facility. We would, in putting in the new air traffic control system, we would avoid that cost. And as we have to put in infrastructure into Western Sydney Airport, a new air traffic control tower as well as a new fire station, that balances out, that we'll avoid putting that extra cost in. However, it is not a cost-cutting exercise to transfer. One of the main reasons of transferring, it is one of the things that we learned through COVID in putting our controllers and service delivery where we have greater staffing base. At our Melbourne Centre, we have 450 air traffic controllers controlling the southern half of Australia and even into the Indian Ocean and Southern Ocean. And to keep the resilience of that service provision, having more controllers around and making sure that it is better than having a smaller staffing base, that if we have COVID or some infection that we have to shut down that service. So we're looking at from a service resilience point of view, first and foremost, and making sure our Brisbane Centre and our Melbourne Centre can provide and give a resilience to our services. And then on top of that, we get the added benefit of avoiding probably around $50 million worth of cost that the industry have to afford by putting in the infrastructure into Sydney, particularly with Western Sydney Airport.
So is this the first time Airservices has considered relocating these jobs?
This is not the first time we have considered relocating the services we provide in the airspace around Sydney to Melbourne. It was considered in 2003 and it was considered briefly in about 2015.
Just on those occasions, ultimately, why was the decision made not to relocate?
In the first instance, in 2003, that was also timed with consolidating the services in Cairns as well as Adelaide, and that was put off, deferred until 2008, and in 2008, due to circumstances, it was decided not to proceed at that stage. And in 2015, thereabouts, when it was considered, the decision was made to go ahead with Cairns and Adelaide, but leave Sydney in situ at that time.
So on the previous occasions, I just move to safety considerations. So what are the safety considerations for the reason for the move, and what contingency plans have you got? You mentioned, of course, potential pandemic, COVID, as part of the explanation. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
So for all of our services, we have contingency plans in place in the advent of equipment failure, industrial action, a range of different, to ensure that we can provide the level of service. When that does occur, the standard of service to maintain the safety level, if we interact our contingency plans, means we slow the system down to ensure that safety is never compromised. That's why you may have been involved in Sydney when there gets delays because we don't have enough staff, or we've had an equipment failure and everything slows down for the day, while we maintain the safety levels. In relocating the Sydney services to Melbourne, we would have to consider the safety of the move in doing the change management, but there is no change to the service level that we are providing. We make it more resilient because we have more staff and redundancy with the system. And there is no impact to safety at all. The mode of operation we are going to with Sydney is no different to what we've done here in Canberra. So when you take off here in Canberra or about to land in Canberra, you are being controlled from Melbourne. That's been done since the late 1990s. Same with Coolangatta out of Brisbane, Cairns out of Brisbane, Adelaide out of Melbourne, and this is not just an Australian thing. This is also something that's done worldwide. If you're flying in and out of London or the London terminal area, Gatwick, Stansted, Luton, Heathrow, you're being controlled from Southampton down the south of England. It's not new. This is sort of standard for air traffic control practice.
So, can you provide on notice whatever internal memo or document Airservices would have drafted, which would have provided a rationale on the previous occasions where this relocation was considered but ultimately rejected?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So just when evaluating this decision, how does Airservices quantify the value of safety against the value of cutting costs, and has those been considerations and how they've been considered in your decision?
First of all, Senator, this is not a cost-cutting exercise, so it's not a consideration. First and foremost, the safety of air navigation is the most important consideration, and this decision to do this, when we make it, will be ensuring that there is no impact to safety at all.
So correct me if I'm wrong, a zero net reduction in the capabilities of our air traffic controller systems. So I'll re-say that. Just regarding the 60, if the 65, just so I'm clear, the 65, and you've answered this before, I just want to be clear, the 65, if they ultimately decide to remain in Sydney, they do have secure jobs.
Yes.
I just want to return to another matter regarding recruitment of fire station manager. As you're aware, the Airservices has recently advertised 12 AALM positions, fire station managers, without having to comply with the aviation regulations and MOS. Is that correct?
Senator, I'd have to take that on notice. I'm unaware of that.
Thank you for taking on notice. Why would Airservices allow or want the most senior officers on a fire station to be unqualified?
Senator, we wouldn't. So I just have to. I think that's related to your first question. I just need to make sure that I'd be speaking. Anyone we recruit for a fire station manager would have to meet the requirements for that role, and if there are regulatory requirements to do so, we would ensure that they were. I just need to. I am not. I'd have to educate myself on what those regulatory requirements are. So if I can take that on notice.
Right. Isn't somebody here going to assist us now? So we can take it on notice if there's no one here to assist us now.
No, there's no one here to assist us now on that.
When Airservices asked for the exemption, the CFO, Glenn Wood, made it clear to the committee from the fire stations that it would allow for a better COC arrangement. So is that correct? So I've got. So I understand when Airservices were asked for an exemption, and this is the way I'm reading it. So the CFO, Glenn Wood, made it clear to this committee, or this Senate committee, that it would allow for a better COC arrangement.
Do you mind if I take that one on notice, Senator? Because the reason I say that is not. I can speculate on a couple of those things. However, I just want to confirm what that exemption is about and what exemption we're talking about. So I am speculating that it's to do with the qualifications of a fire station manager, and I'm just not quite sure. There's a number of acronyms, or the acronym of COC. There's a number of things that could fit.
All right,
so,
well, what I might do is I might give you some more questions on notice, but I'll just ask you a couple more questions on the subject.
That's right. I just don't want to speculate, Senator.
That's fine. Are you aware whether CASAS has been made fully aware regarding these 12 AALMs positions, or that's again something you need to take on notice?
I would assume that we would be talking to CASA, but I'll take it on notice to confirm what we have.
I'll just move to another subject. So there's some other questions I'll have on notice, but I'll relay them too. In May 2020, there was a release of the report, a review of culture at Airservices Australia, as you're aware. We've talked about that on previous occasions here. We're aware that you've done some follow-up surveys of the Broderick review. What can you tell us about these results?
So we've done. We introduced late last year what we call a culture pulse check, where we can check our culture and ask a set of questions on a regular basis, and we're starting to do that on a monthly basis. What those were telling us is that we were making very incremental progress in the time. However, there's further work to do. A number of things that came out of those is that there was very much still in line with the results of the Broderick review. So there was still a fair bit of work to do. The organisation isn't as inclusive as we would like it to be. The fact that local teams are quite supportive of each other, however, their mistrust of the rest of the organisation is there. There are criticism about the leadership of the organisation, very much similar or not too much materially different to what came out of the Broderick review. What we have done is that because the recommendations, we have all actioned those out of the Broderick review, and now it's been nearly 12 months since the Broderick review has been released. We are now conducting what we've called a post-implementation review of those actions, including that culture pulse check, to ensure that we're getting the right information out of them and we're making the right progress with it rather than just keep banging around on some actions. One of the things we did find out with the culture pulse check is that doing it monthly is that whether we're getting fatigue on the people, because we're only getting about 30% of the population, about 1,300 employees regularly contributing when we've got 3,600. So how do we get the penetration to actually get the piece? And so we're bringing in a person to do that. Are we asking the right questions? How do we do this on the regular basis to ensure that we get the outcome that we're trying to get out of the culture review, not just do a tick in the box and say we've completed the actions?
Mr. Harfield, that sounds very logical, and should be congratulated on continuing to look at improved practice. Are we able to get a copy of the report and a copy of the survey results?
The survey's results, we can. You mean the Broderick report?
We've got the Broderick review. There's a report that's attached to the survey results.
So the survey results, because we publish them to staff as well as the leaders, we can provide a copy of that.
Yep. And have you got a copy of a report that sort of assesses? Well, that's all the same thing, is it?
So if you see the reports over the, so the report that would come out would be at the, we started, I think it was January, if I remember correctly. So we did January and then we did in February and March.
Yes.
We can show you the January, the February and the March, and you can see that the shift is not, it's incremental at best.
Yep.
And that's one of the things we're assessing is do you need to leave a little bit more time, like do it once a quarter, for example, to start seeing, because one of the questions we ask is, do you believe you'll see material change as a result of this survey? Well, material change is a big change, and if you're sort of not seeing it, you're not always going to get. And so are we targeting it right? But we can show that over those reports. Yeah,
thanks. Thank you, Mr. Harfield. Just regarding, do we have a report back on how long it's taking to conduct investigations regarding a safe place? Like we talked about this on previous occasions. Where are we up to now? And have some of them dragged on as long as 14 months?
Senator, I'll take that on us to give you the exact figures, but there have been a couple that have dragged on.
Yep. So if you can give us the update on that, and what's some of the issues regarding what's the consequences of the drag on? If you can just give me a broad sort of insight into why some of those ones are going for 14 months or longer.
Some of the times is that the individuals that need to be interviewed are on sick leave and cannot necessarily be accessed for a variety of different reasons. Which is usually one of the reasons why they do sometimes drag on, or information is not necessarily provided, or sometimes other things can get opened up in the investigation that also need to be looked at. It's not always the most efficient, but there are sometimes some factors that do warrant. However, it is not the preference, because the longer that they go on, the uncertainty that's there.
Mr. Harfield, in the various inquiries there, that was regarding the culture within the service. There was a number of varying levels of staff and management roles that there was some critical commentary about. Is there any of those people that were negatively found, that were negatively dealing with culture amongst the management that is still in their role, and is there a ongoing program of testing management's attitude to cultural change as well?
Absolutely, Senator. One of the things that was introduced as a result of the body review is for leadership, is that we have introduced a leadership standard, which is based around ensuring that our leaders are much more humanistic, and it's really around, in a basic standard, that your leader knows you, values you, etc. That standard is used as the base assessment for selection of our leaders, but also managing their performance. It is very much first and foremost, and I have made it quite clear within the organisation that managing and leading staff from a cultural aspect is first and foremost for all leaders, and if they don't feel that they have a role in leading the right culture in the organisation, then this is not the organisation for them.
Right. Just want to move to unless I think one of my colleagues wanted to ask questions now, or you can break in. I've still got some more questions. But.
Sure. I might just ask a couple of questions on PFAS, if I could, Mr. Harfield. Yeah. I just wanted to get an update. I know you put out, Airservices Australia put out a press release, I think it was in 2018, just about the research that was being done by the University of Queensland and the work that Airservices Australia was also doing with them, and you provided a significant amount of money towards the study, and I was just wondering if someone could give me an update as to how that was going.
If my memory serves me correctly, I think either the interim report has been delivered or the final report, which I can provide.
Which final report's that? Because I just had a briefing with the University of Queensland. They're still in the process of their studies. Are you talking...
So this is where go wrong. There may have been some interim findings of the longitudinal health study that we had. That's
the ANU one? Are you talking about the ANU one?
Senator, then I'm going to have to take it on notice.
Okay. I know that there was there was one significant study, and that was the ANU PFAS epidemiological study, which is probably what you're referring to.
Yeah, we were doing the longitude testing of the firefighters with their blood sampling, if that's right. The one that you're talking about. We've had some where we did it, and I thought that was with the University of Queensland, so I will, before I continue on talking about something that I'm not maybe the correct thing, we'll take on notice to provide you what information that we have. Sure. So
are you able to provide information as to how many firefighters have taken up the study?
Yes, we can.
Yes. So
how many were done previously that have also done it the second time as well?
That's right. Yeah, have you got that information with you? Or
not with me. I can provide that.
You can provide that. And also, just what is the situation at Yulara Airport and Alice Springs and also Darwin Airport? I know that PFAS, the foam, had ceased being used in 2010, according to previous evidence that you provided. So I'd just like an update as to what's actually happening in those respective airports.
So we're about to conduct a review at Yulara Airport. In Alice Springs, I do have to take it on notice. I did try to refresh myself with it prior to coming over here, but it's left my memory right at this moment in time. With Darwin, there is a review being done by Defence because it's a Defence estate for Darwin, but we no longer use the PFAS-related foam. That was transitioned out about a year or so ago, if my memory serves me correctly.
And what about the communication still with the firefighters that Airservices employs? What occurs now in terms of awareness around PFAS or any ongoing impacts?
We have an ongoing program and awareness, and I'll provide the details of that on notice with the full thing of what we do. All
right. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Sheldon.
Good, thank you. Just move to Surveillance Flight Information Services, SFIS. You're introducing at Ballina and Mangalore. Does the SFIS adhere to a standard ICAO practice? Or are you creating a brand new standard while also trying to implement the ICAO practice?
Senator, the service that we have provided, the Surveillance Flight Information Service, is a service that we provide today in that type of airspace, which is classified as, you'll hear it being called outside controlled airspace or Class G airspace. The obligation that air traffic services provide is for what are called instrument flight rules aircraft, which is the ones that similar to airlines, regular public transport type flights, is that we provide traffic information on them to each other. That is a standard ICAO service that is provided, which is mandated as part of the airspace services that are doing. What we're doing with Surveillance Flight Information Service is utilising the surveillance coverage that we have, either radar coverage or ADS-B, where the controller can see them on their screen, to enhance that service, which is done pretty much today, but we're focusing closer to these airports. The other added difference that we are providing is that currently now, as an aircraft in that type of airspace gets closer to the aerodrome, they switch to what's called a common traffic advisory frequency, which today the air traffic controller or air traffic service provider we don't monitor. So when the aircraft says that they switch to the CTAF frequency, we don't know what communications they're having with any other flight, even though we've given them traffic information. So we don't know whether they're sorting themselves out, which is they're supposed to do in that airspace. This Surveillance Flight Information Service is allowing a controller to be much more dedicated rather than to a large tract of airspace to around that aerodrome, providing the same level of service that they would do in a broader thing, but much more focused. So it's the same sort of service class that's there now. The difference is we will also now monitor that common traffic advisory frequency to ensure the protection. And the reason that we focused on Mangalore and Ballina is that Mangalore, and it was mentioned earlier today with the ATSB, there was a mid-air collision between two instrument flight rules aircraft at Mangalore earlier last year. And this was a quick way of making sure that we can add added protection in those areas. And Ballina has increased by traffic by 50% to what it was pre-COVID, and in December last year was Australia's busiest airport. There's no air traffic control there today. And so this is a way for us to make sure that we can manage the safety of those areas, utilising the service levels that are there, the technology we have, and is compliant and consistent with ICAO standards.
So is there a coincidence that Ballina and Mangalore are the test sites for this system, when both saw recent incidents, one a mid-air collision, another a very near miss?
Yeah, we saw the risk profile and we wanted to make sure that we can manage the risks at those airports more fully. Normally, The upgrading of the service or the service enhancement would be putting in an air traffic control tower, which would take a couple of years to do. We would change the class of airspace, a whole range of things where this is what we can do relatively quickly to manage the risk at those airports associated with it. As said, there was the mid-air at Mangalore in February last year, but also, as just previously mentioned, Ballina is 50% busier than it was pre-COVID, and last year, there is a range of a number of incidents that have occurred, particularly over the last 6 months, where there have been close calls between Jetstar aircraft and like hang gliders and things like that. So this is a way for us to enhance the safety of those aerodromes.
Given the ATSB's investigations into these incidents at Mangalore and Ballina are not yet finalised, just a logical question, why are the changes being implemented now if they're not quite the changes that are necessary? And what's the circumstances of the change if the ATSB's recommendations, suggest a different path? If
they suggest a different path, then we will take that path. This is that we see an immediate risk at those airports to maintain the safety, so we're doing everything that we possibly can in the time frame that we can. And if there is further things that come out with the investigation that we're not quite aware of, we will take those actions as well. But I didn't want to be in a position to sit back and wait for an investigation that may take 12 months to 18 months when we're seeing and managing that risk on a day-to-day basis today.
I just want to move to another question regarding the UFUA, the Firefighters Union, recently travelled to Port Hedland, Karratha and Newman stations to visit members at those locations. And they informed me that they found that at the 3 stations, as supported by Airservices, they've been breaching and ignoring the call-out contingency rules, which forms part of their approved operations manual. Are you aware of those concerns?
No, I'm not, Senator, but I will take that on notice to review.
Thank you. If you can take it on notice. Are you aware that these stations range between 2.5 to 5.5 hours driving time between them?
I understand that there's that driving time between them, yes.
Suggested that rather than allocating a call-out officer capable of arriving and having any kind of timely impact, these 3 stations, with Airservices' blessing, are nominating their own AALMs or fire commanders as the other station's COC officer, back to the COC officer.
Must be commander.
Are you aware of this?
I'm not aware of it, but I will look into it, Senator, to determine what
The assertion is that this means that they can not meet any sort of reasonable response time, and they can also strip required resources to provide a COC at another station. UFUA members are not happy with this. I'm expressing what their concerns are. It puts the OIC at those stations in a seriously compromised position in their view, knowing that there is no COC available for at least 2.5 to 5.5 hours in the event of a crash. It also places the COC officer at risk responding possibly in the evening or night time on country roads with livestock. Other animals place them at risk along with their own fatigue issues of working their own shift and then responding for 5.5 hours for a COC. Can you make any observations? Some of this, you by all means, take it on notice. So there's some detail there of what's been proposed.
What you've recited, they are quite valid concerns from a work health and safety perspective, and everything we're trying to do is to actually minimise people travelling on roads on long distances for a variety of different reasons. So I'll take that on notice and review that, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Senator Sheldon. Senator Patrick.
Thank you very much. It's been too long since I saw you last. I just want to go to OneSky, just seeing the status of that project. From memory, the budget for that was about $1.2 billion. Has that changed at all? I'm just going back a few years.
No, it hasn't, Senator. That's the contract price with Thales for what we're going to define as CMATS, which is the civil military air traffic. So it's the kit.
And I seem to recall it was something like $500 or $600 million for your side, and there was
If I remember correctly, it's sort of like a 55-45 ratio.
between defence and
Defence and
yourself. Okay, back in 2017-18, February 2018, I asked some questions around project milestones,
Yep.
and you provided me with those. So I'm just going to duck to things that are more closer. The critical design review was supposed to be completed Q2 of 2020. Did that occur at that time?
Q4 2020.
Okay, so there's...
There was about a 6-month slippage in that, partly due to COVID and getting a few pieces in the dynamics that we had with the work out of Melbourne, etc. However, and also making sure that previous work that had been done that had been rounded out before we could make sure that we come out of CDR as clean as we possibly can, considering it as one of the biggest milestones.
Okay, so you've got an extra 6 months. Normally, as a former project manager, that means you've got 6 months of salaries that tack on to the end because you can't close the project down. So is that additional cost going to be borne by contingency within the project?
Potentially, Senator, so the contract that we have is a target cost incentive model, which has
Sure.
pain share, gain share.
Sure.
And there are specific milestone payments that, or sections of the contract that you've got to meet before you can go to the next piece. So it's not like just sort of like a running cost all the way through. And at this stage, obviously we're keeping an eye on, and we start entering into pain share the more that goes on, because there are other opportunities that have been picked up.
Perhaps on notice, come back and have a look at that,
Yep.
whether or not that's going to have an impact on the cost of the project. The next milestone that was due was the Perth Terminal Control Unit, refurbished and ready for installation phase Q2 of 2021.
So that will be later. We put that on hold during COVID due to one of the things that we were looking at during that COVID period. We put it on hold, was there was the potential for us to consolidate our Perth. We were exploring consolidating our Perth centre into Pearce to try and minimise costs, because we weren't quite sure what the flow-on effect with COVID would be. We explored that, but that was allowing due to COVID, and so that is now underway, but it's not on the critical path to be delivered in time for install.
Okay. Can I go back to then... so do you have a time frame for that?
I have to take that on notice on what the...
I actually wouldn't mind if you went back to question number 43 of additional estimates, 2017-18. So departmental question number SQ 18000064, and come back to the committee with actually this table, which was your baseline, and then for
Where
each
we
of the
are now.
milestones, what date you hit. Can I just go back to PDR? PDR, Preliminary Design Review, was completed, or supposed to be completed in Q4 of 2019. Do you recall what date that was?
Q4 2019, it was December 2019.
Okay, so that met schedule, so the slippage has cut across predominantly the COVID period.
That's correct.
Okay, do you have a change in expected final acceptance date?
At this moment in time, we're looking at a range between 6 to 12 months across the life of the project.
Okay, so you're saying maybe 2026 instead of 2025?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and what are the mitigation strategies? I presume that just means you have to keep the current system running for longer, and you don't enjoy the benefit of the shared military civil aspects of it.
Not as black and white as that. Is that the rollout of OneSky and CMATs is done in 3 tranches. There will be the first release 0, or RZ as we call it. That first stage allows the military to come off their current ADATS equipment, and also establishes I call it the system architecture and the flight data processing. At that RZ milestone, and at this moment in time, the install work is being carried out at East Sale. This was one of the first sites to occur. Then there will be release 1, which is when the civil system will come online, or the civil sectors, air traffic
So
positions.
Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth.
Yep, that will start, and that will take us a couple of years, because obviously we can't sort of shut up shop on a Friday night and then turn on Big Bang on Monday. We've got to keep the 2 systems running and move across. And then release 2 will bring in further enhancements to the software, so that we will start getting the benefits and some of the harmonisation benefits, as well as some of the benefits to industry through that period from RZ all the way through to R2. We don't have to wait till final acceptance to get all the benefits.
Okay, as a matter of some controversy, or conjecture, maybe is a better word, that you'd end up with a different hardware baseline between the military and the civil systems. Is that where it's gone to? So,
no, we will have exactly the same, and that's where the release is that the hardware baseline stays the same all the way through. Even when there will be a hardware refresh, it's exactly the same across the board. And then we have these releases, which are the sort of the software upgrades as we go along.
Okay. Now, the other thing you'll remember, the awful days of this committee looking into the early stages of this project with some very, very heavily paid consultants. The issue went to consultants. I think we looked at consultants who were receiving a daily rate of more than $2,500. I think it was the I can't remember the organisation, one of the project management organisations, where there was some concern. I think the auditor looked at it as well. Are you paying any of your consultants more than that $2,500 per day rate?
Not to my knowledge, Senator, but I'll take it on notice to confirm.
Okay. All right. Can you give me also an update on the spend on the project to date? So, and do you look at that from a military perspective, defence perspective, and a civil perspective? Is it? I don't know how to ask the question. Do I go and ask Defence what their costs are on their part side, or how does that work?
From our perspective, so when you talk to Defence, they're talking about Air 54 31 Phase 3, which is their portion of the CMATS project, and then introducing CMATS into them. So it's not sort of OneSky as a whole. The way that we have set up the contract with Thales and doing OneSky is that we've got the contract with Thales in that 55-45 split, and then we on supply to Defence. So we're the prime contractor or the contract with Thales, and then we on supply to Defence. Defence costs are around their portion, and then obviously their install costs, etc., with all the different interfaces that are required, and also their facilities and integration. The cost that we will talk about is what we are with our facilities, our portion of the contract, etc., to get it in. What we have charged Defence, or the agreement with Defence, is that we have given Defence a fixed price for things. So we're carrying the risks associated with it, with the contract with Thales.
Sure.
And so to get into Defence costs, you'll have to talk to Defence, because we don't necessarily have visibility.
Are you using own valued management as a method for tracking the project? So getting a nod from the CFO. Yes. Okay, can I ask, and I accept you might want to redact some elements of this, that you provide the latest earned value management report associated with the project to the committee. And just finally, so I presume that's a good method of tracking. Well, actually, I might just ask the CFO at the moment. Yep. Noting you're behind schedule, is the spend lagging as well?
Senator Paul Logan, Chief Financial Officer, Airservices. Yes. So the earned value is close to the expected earned value.
Okay.
We've spent a long time, obviously, with Taliesin Defence looking at how we deal with the consequence of COVID. In a really rough sense, we're between 45 and 50% of the spend at the moment, to give you a sense of how far in we are. So there's still a fair amount of flexibility in terms of how we manage that over the next few years as well.
All right. Well, I look forward to seeing the EVM report. There might be some commercial bits in there that you need to redact, but thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Senator Patrick. Senator Rennick.
Hi guys, how are you going? I've just got some questions about Airservices Australia aircraft noise complaints handling processes. And you're welcome to take them on notice if you need to.
That's right, I've got my resident expert.
Okay. Okay. Ready to go? Yep, sure. So, how many staff are in the Noise Complaints and Information Services team responsible for managing complaints and inquiries about aircraft noise and operations, and where are those staff actually located?
Thank you, Senator. Pete Curran, Airservices Australia Chief Customer Experience and Strategy Officer. The noise and complaints handling unit is based in Sydney.
Sure.
There are the team that handles community engagement more broadly is located also in Brisbane, Canberra, and also Melbourne. So we have the team broadly spread out. There's about 6 to 8 roles dedicated in the function in Sydney today.
Right, thank you. How many complaints and inquiries in total does the NCIS team handle each year? And can you please provide a breakdown on the number and proportion of those complaints received via online, by phone or by post?
Can we take that one on notice?
Yeah,
Senator, give
you're
that
welcome to. That's no worries. How many of these complaints and inquiries relate to aircraft noise at Brisbane Airport? And again, can you please provide a breakdown of the number and proportion of those complaints received via online, by phone and by post?
Senator, we'll certainly take those on notice as well to give you the breakdown.
Worries.
I can give you a feel for that now if that's helpful. But
No worries. And has the number and level of community complaints about aircraft noise increased significantly since the second runway became operational at Brisbane Airport in the middle of last year? And if so, could you please provide details of the suburbs affected as indicated by the locations of residents who have lodged complaints since the second runway became operational? You want to take that on notice?
We can say yes to the first part of that question and we'll provide the suburbs.
Yeah, great, awesome. And does every complaint received by Airservices Australia receive an individual response? And if so, and also, do you count and report the total number of complaints received, or just the number of complaints and who lodged them? What is the process you follow when multiple complaints are received from the same person? And do you have a protocol in place where someone who lodges more than one complaint in a month only receives one response per month?
We'll provide you the protocols on that in our rule, because there is a range of things where, for example, if it is a complainant complaining about exactly the same thing multiple times, we treat that as one complaint.
Yep.
However, if that one complainant complains about 2 different events, then they'll be treated as 2. So we'll provide that protocol.
Okay, no worries. I'll put these on notice for you as well. Cheers, thank you.
Chair, if I can, just in relation to the question Senator Watt asked,
Yes.
Brisbane Airport is back online, running on mains, no delays. The only impact was to the international terminal.
I think that's extraordinary that you can have 500,000 people go out and get people back online so quickly. My daughter reports that she was back online after 30 minutes, so I think that is an extraordinary shout out to the professionalism of Energex people right across the state that they manage that. That was terrific. Look, I know we have some more questions for you. We have run out of senators. This is quite unlike me, but we're going to go to an early break and come back to you. 15 minutes, 20 past 4, please. Thank you.